Welcome to Bite Size Dental Marketing. Today, I have Managing Director at Skytale Group and my friend, Ben Hernandez. Ben, I love the story. Obviously, I'm somewhat familiar with the story of Skytale Group and your journey, but I know you came from investment banking, you've been in financial services, you've been in advisories, hedge funds. I would love to hear more about your journey from how you got started and where we met at MWA to today. What have you been doing all this time?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. Excited for today. As you touched on, my story is primarily financial in nature. Out of school, did investment banking, went back to get my MBA, post MBA, worked at a hedge fund, I think still most of my career. And in 2015, that's when I ended up in this space and just completely fell in love. Went to a tax accounting and consulting firm, as you touched on, MWA at the time, and ended up leading the consulting department. And that was a bit of a career pivot, obviously. So I
Mhm.
wasn't really sure early on, but I really fell in love with the business owners had always been my heroes. And I always wanted to be a business owner. And it's scary. It sounds scary. And as you get older and have more responsibilities, even scarier. So
Mhm.
I fell in love with this concept of doctors who went to dental or medical school and are brilliant, but didn't go to business school, wanting to grow and scale. And I just thought that was so phenomenal, met some amazing personalities. And as you mentioned, that's where you and I met. But specifically, I was very interested in doctors wanting to grow and scale and potentially sell their businesses. So that was really the idea behind Skytale, which we founded in 2018. Now, how we founded it is also interesting. I owe you a big thank you.
Mm.
As I touched on, I never thought I would end up being a business owner after I realized how scary it was. But you caught me at the perfect time of you're meeting these entrepreneurs and you realize that they are not perfect. They have flaws, they have doubts, they have things they're confident in, but they struggle every day like any other normal human. So I was starting to gain a little confidence of, oh, they're not infallible. And you and we and Andre happened to chat, a few days,
Yeah.
but we had this great idea of, what if we do something together? Could there be something there? So went to the pain-free offices for a while, which was amazing and in an amazing town and city. And, you ended up really, so thank you, initially funding Skytale. And that was the genesis of it. And it's been a fun story ever since as well. So, again, thank you. But yeah, what we do at Skytail, we help grow, scale, and sell businesses. So we have two teams to do it. We have a consulting team for businesses who need help on the grow and scaling side of things, which for us typically is in the financial and
Mhm.
operational
Mhm.
realms. And we have an investment banking team for any businesses that are ready to sell, typically to institutional capital.
No, no, I'm really honored to be part of your story. I get asked regularly how to start a company or how to become an entrepreneur or whatever nomenclature is appropriate in 2023. But I never had a plan B. I certainly doubt myself, but I never doubted the ability to be performant. And I think that was it. And it was such a fun ride back then when you were coming into the office and we were talking about Skytail and how to layer it into the marketing. And I still look back as one of the fondest times of the last decade for me is that era. And it led to such great partnerships and friends. And, between you and Jessica and that era, I look back so fondly on the entire experience. So I'm glad to be part of that story. But to come back to today, what are you seeing as the trends in the marketplace? Because from when we in 2018 to today, when Skytel was founded to today, I mean, there's been massive shifts in the underlying industry. What are you seeing today?
Yeah, as you said, massive shifts. If you look back to 2018, the economy was extremely strong. Consolidation in dental was certainly happening, but probably closer to 20% or so. So when we look at things today, you're looking at an economy in the United States and globally that the capital markets are generally tough, which means different things to business owners as compared to institutional capital investors, but not good for either of them. And then, the past year or two, it's been very speculative as to whether are we going into a recession? Are we already in a recession?
Mhm.
Clearly, we're already in an inflationary environment. That makes borrowing more difficult, among other things. So, the positives, though, is there's still a lot of capital that private equity has to deploy. So, where do they deploy it? In this case, what they're looking at is which industries are highly susceptible to market downturns and inflationary environments. And fortunately, in dentistry, we have a really positive track record of being recession resistant. So
Mhm.
that's a big plus for the industry because money's still coming into dentistry due to that. And it continues to grow, sometimes at a glacial pace, 3-4% a year, but it grows and it continues to do so. So we're still seeing a lot of excitement there. Now, if we do remain in something like this, it obviously hurts and puts some pressure on things from a valuation perspective, even if not on multiples, maybe more so on if you as the business owner, if your patients aren't coming in as frequently because they're trying to figure out where to allocate home spending as well, it could hurt your cash flow. And then certainly it hurts smaller business owners a little bit more because if you're someone trying to go from 3 to 4 practices, then the increased interest rate and the increased scrutiny on lending clearly have an effect on our clients that are trying to scale their businesses. So,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
hiring's getting more expensive, which puts a little bit of pressure on profitability in general. But fortunately, all things considered, I think if you needed to pick a space, given we can't control macroeconomics, dentistry is one of the top spaces that any of us would pick, I think.
Right. Now, I have a question for you when you talk about interest rates. And I came from tech, before dental, so my knowledge on this may be skewed to tech. But in tech, the healthy companies continued to get funded even as money became more expensive. But the second bite of the apple, as they say, right, the going public or the big private equity deals of you consolidate in and then you sell. Those were the deals that started to get challenging, and the second bite of the apple seemed to get further and further away as money tightened up. It
Mhm.
wasn't my firm's valuation; it was that second bite. Is that how it kind of plays out in dental as well?
I think somewhat. I think, in tech, so much of it is forward looking,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so much of it is, I think, if you're investing in tech, especially if you're more in a VC world, you're investing in hopefully the future of something. So they're very accustomed to a lot of those not working out and failing. I think in dentistry, the difference is if I'm a dentist, a business owner, I think banks are a lot more strict with dentistry from the perspective of they don't expect them or want them to fail. They don't really have a lot of those ratios built in, at least
Hmm.
not to the level of high growth tech. But I do agree with you, especially on the sell side. I do think that if it starts hurting, companies as they're acquiring assets and selling to larger private equity groups, you might see that elongated out a bit because they're trying to time as well of when do I sell? Is now the time? Or you're trying to project out, maybe we come out of this potential recession that we may or may not be in a year or two. Should we wait a year or two? So yes, I do think that we've seen some of the larger consolidators maybe wait a little bit longer than they would have in a normal economic environment.
Now, what are you seeing for we'll call emerging DSO in the 5 to 15? How have you seen the economy and industry impact them in today's?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think the economy and environment, and not only are we in this economic environment we're in, but we also just came out of a pandemic that
Mhm.
also had a shift in general thinking of team members, right? So I think, number one in hygiene and dentistry, there's what some of us have called the great retirement, right? That has pained offices to due to a reduced workforce. I think overall hiring has been better recently, but
Hmm.
you have to pay people more. As an example, hygiene schools we've heard they're telling some of their grads not to accept jobs for less than 50 an hour in some markets. So, in some markets, 38 to 39 was acceptable. We're now seeing 42 to 45. So I think from a hiring perspective, we've seen payroll come up a little bit. We think
Yeah.
maybe it's half a percentage to percentage point. But overall, I think hiring has been okay if you take it outside of hygiene. You just have to pay more. But the supply is getting better. I think, one of the things that we're seeing a lot in the industry is people are interested in how do I get paid faster and at a higher rate. So before, for example, we used to look at KPIs, like look at the AR bucket. I think right now what we're focusing on is digging a little bit deeper, more into, how much does that RCM process actually cost? So you're getting into how many times did we touch that claim? How do we improve efficiencies through AI technology? So now you're starting to get into the technological advances as well. And then I think one other interesting one in some of the ones that you're talking about is we're seeing some thoughts around internal insurance maybe becoming a model. So this might be on the larger side of what you mentioned, Eric, but we're starting to see some internal insurance discussions that maybe are better suited to patient care than being, for lack of a better word, stuck in that framework of discounted insurers or accepting fewer insurers. So those are
Hmm.
some of the things that we're seeing.
I've heard numbers that range from 50% in 10 years to 80% in 5 years. Where do you put current consolidation in dental? And again, I think if you use medical and optometry and pharmacy and all the others before, how do you see the traditional private equity and growth vehicles change in dental versus the predecessors?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the advantages we have is we kind of have a history book to look back to, whether it's, hospitals in the medical space or pharmacy or even banks if you're going outside of healthcare. But I think, starting with where are we today, I think we're about 30 to 33% consolidated
Hmm.
in dental. So our thoughts are in 5 years or so, we might be bumping into that 50% range, maybe a little bit below that. I mean, we talked earlier in 2018, it was maybe low 20s, and now 5 years later, we're in the 30s. So it is continuing to accelerate as well. So I think in 5 years we'll be in the 50% range. Now, what does that mean? I love that you asked this actually, because what that means, if you look at other industries, when you get to 60% plus consolidated, that's when you start seeing downward pressure on valuations and multiples, in addition to performance, right? Because when you get to that level, that means that 60% of the market, so double what we are now, let's say, okay, is now managed by large platform DSOs that deploy a lot of back end support for their practices. So I, a practice owner that hangs my shingle and now competing with that, that's one thing. So can I perform as well? That's one question. The other one is from an investor point of view, why would someone pay a big valuation for me when they already have a lot of that white space built in? We're in Dallas, let's say. We already have a lot of that Dallas white space built in. You have to start now as an investor figuring out, would I pay X multiple or whatever valuation for Ben's practice? Why not de novo? Why not do something else that's a lot cheaper?
Right.
So when it gets to 60%, you start seeing some of that. But so we still have quite a ways to go
Hmm.
from a,
Hmm.
nice valuation perspective.
Yeah, I think somewhere in and in tech too, somewhere in the 55 to 60% is where there's an opportunity cost to buy you, unless there's a strategic reason I would buy this practice. I am probably better off sticking to my own model, building a new practice in the same place and then competing. That's one of the things that I wish the the general population of dentists understood, is that everyone likes to talk about how the DSOs don't have the quality of care. And by and large, I agree with them in theory. I believe what the general practitioner doesn't understand is that they're going to catch up. I don't know that today we view optometry chain and optometry private as better or less than. They tend to equalize. But the one thing that private equity and these organizations are doing well is they're supporting those clinics from an HR side, from a revenue cycle management, like you said, side, from a marketing side, and they're bringing experts to bear in those practices, and they're shoring up the weaknesses of maybe that single owner doctor or that single or that location, and that it's hard to compete with that over time. And that's where private equity almost always wins, in a race against a single, just because of the resources they can bring to bear.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, if you think about it, and you said catch up, I think that's the key word here is, we've been in consolidation about 15 years or maybe a little bit more in dentistry. So I think that what we've seen is this version of private equity consolidation compared to 15 years ago is a lot different because they have started to adapt and realize that separation of church and state and how
Hmm.
important it is, meaning I, private equity, am going to help you on the administrative side. Things that you probably, Dr. Hubbard, don't even like to do anyway. You're not
Hmm.
going to complain to me if I take away your accounting, if I help you recruit better, if I take away HR functions and the like. And on the marketing side, leave maybe boots on the ground, closer marketing to you while I do a lot of the analytics in the background. Those are things that you're not going to mind. And I leave you to provide great patient care. In fact, you now have a greater focus on your client, who is the patient, and then a really well run DSO, you're the client of theirs, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So the ones who were able to figure that out, I think, have done, a really marvelous job. The other thing on patient care that's important, I had a client say this once, and we even applied at our firm now because he's absolutely right. He's a fantastic oral surgeon. But he said, at the end of the day, you, Ben, don't even know if I'm a good oral surgeon or not. So we're a marketing firm because nobody knows that I'm a good oral surgeon or whether I'm a bad oral surgeon. They don't know how to measure that. There's no way to measure who really is the best oral surgeon here. So,
Right.
how am I going to get you in the door? Marketing. And he said, at the end of the day, we're a marketing firm. And I think that's what a lot of, doctors probably ought to realize is that most patients don't know if you're a fantastic dentist or
Nope.
not. Bedside manner is very
They
important.
know how you made
Certainly,
us
how you
feel.
make.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. That's important. But I don't know whether you did a fantastic job filling my cavity or not. It's not a commodity. But I'm not educated. A typical patient is not educated enough to know, oh, this one is
Hmm.
better. And then the other thing is, most patients don't know whether there's a DSO running it behind the scenes because most investors allow, you know, Hubbard DDS to remain on the door.
No, you nailed it. And even if we did know, it's like saying, I work for the greatest company on the planet. Well, you've only had 10 jobs. You've not experienced all of them. So you don't actually know anything. I mean, you know how this made you feel. That is marketing. And I think that is what the DSOs understand and the private equity understands, is that they're getting to real consumer behavior and what's driving it, and how well you can construct your bite and your margins. All of that is really important, but we often see average dentists who understand the connection with patients outperform phenomenal dentists who might not know how to highlight their talents regularly.
100%. Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think that's why, his comment on the marketing thing, hit the nail on the head is bring them in the door. And if you're fantastic at what you do, you'll get the right patients in there. I just thought that was a phenomenal
Hmm.
thing to
Hmm.
say. And yeah, like not many people know pain-free dental management is the best place to work, but I do because you were making us the chili pepper things every few weeks, and I loved it. So, but you're right. Not many people know that unless you're there.
Yeah, man, they might be giving away free stuff here every day. Who knows? You mentioned investment banking. We talked a little bit on the pre-show about it. What's next for you? where is Skytale headed, and where are you going in the world?
Yeah, I think, next for us as a firm is, from a management consulting side of things, we really started and we're still passionate and it's still our core. We really started by wanting to help out those, entrepreneurial doctor owners. They're our heroes, and we say it internally within these walls all the time. And that's typically 3 to 15 type location clients
Mhm.
that are wanting to grow and scale. As we've continued to add talent to the team, we have people that have owned and sold, multi-location. Eric sold a 43 location DSO. David was CEO for a 121 location DSO, private equity backed. Greg sold his DSO and grew it, largely and worked within those walls. So we're actually starting to also help and moving upstream larger mid-market DSOs that
Yeah,
instead of saying, help me run my firm as a whole, are saying, I need a very specific, precise problem or opportunity fixed with you guys. So that's, we're doing that, continuing to move upstream, which I think adds value to even our lower clients because now
sure.
we're able to see those walls. And I think on the investment banking side, same concept. We went from being a broker to now fully licensed investment bank, which allows us to really service our clients even more fully, where we're able to do things now that we weren't before, which is extremely exciting. So we're still focusing on the same EBITDA range, but similar to consulting, especially the groups that we were early on in helping build. We want to one day maybe, provide services for lower mid to mid market type of platforms as well, if they ever are interested in a transaction or a capital raise, whatever it may be.
It's been so amazing to watch Skytel grow and build it into this juggernaut across med spa, across dental that you built, and I'm just humbled that I get to be part of the origin story back there in 5 years ago when it happened. But I mean, my hat's off to what you've built and the team you've built and the culture you have and the company. And I mean, I think it's a testament to you as a human being and how amazing you are. And I appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Eric. And I should be the one thanking you. You saw something in us. I don't know how or why, but thank you for that. You believed in us, and I still remember in your offices picking your brain all the time about. And that's where I even got my thing of, okay, I burned all the boats because of what you said earlier, that you never saw it as anything but. And that's the way I started seeing it. So you provided a lot of guidance and mentorship and, even the culture within your office. I've taken a
Mhm.
few ideas from, like we have snacks here, for example, which I thought was really cool that you always had and provided. So, none of this would have been possible literally without you. And so, thank you. I mean, I think about you just about every day, and thank you for allowing this to happen and for having me on. And, I love what you and the Pain Free team does for your clients in this space.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much. So, well, that was Ben Hernandez.
Thank you, Eric.